My name's Joel Konrad, and I'm here to provide an overview of the work that the Heritage Planning team does for the city. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Frontenac Heritage Foundation and the Kingston Historical Society for the opportunity to speak with all of you tonight. Hope any of you who brave the weather, thank you for coming out. I know it was rough out there, particularly earlier this morning. But it's always a privilege to speak to members of the community who dedicate so much time and effort to history and heritage. So thank you very much. So my goals for the presentation today are to provide a brief description of the heritage planning team as well as its mandate. And then I'd like to go over some recent projects that the heritage planning team has been engaging in over the last several years. Then I'll focus briefly on the challenges that we've faced in working on these projects, and particularly I'll discuss some policy changes some of you may or may not be aware of, the market fluctuations and optics and all these things that have contributed to some of the challenges we've faced over the past few years. And then I'm going to discuss the successes, lessons learned, and goals. But I'm going to start off today by asking the question, why is cultural heritage important? And I'm sure for a lot of the people in this room, cultural heritage has an innate value. We often perceive its importance due to aesthetics or the connection that we have to heritage. But one of the things that the team and I try and do as often as possible is to kind of create these tangible links for people so that they understand why we do what we do at the City of Kingston. And these often can be categorized in three primary areas, and this is economic benefits, social benefits, and environmental benefits. And I'm just going to do I'm going to talk just briefly about these so we can all get on the same page. So economic factors. I think oftentimes when we talk about economic factors, and particularly in places in the city of Kingston in particular, we're talking about tourism. Oftentimes people come to the city of Kingston in order to experience the built environment. Had an opportunity to work on a project last year where several of us were able to engage with not with members of the community, but also members of or people who had traveled from afar, from Quebec, from other areas of Canada, through our heritage management plant project that we've been working on. And what we heard so often was that the built fabric of the city, as well as the waterfront, were just major draws. So tourism is a large economic engine within the city. Innovation in small business is also a driving factor. I'm sure if you walk down Princess Street, you'll note all the small businesses that pop up there. This is common across North America and throughout Europe, where smaller businesses will seek out heritage districts and buildings in order to start their businesses for a variety of reasons. And third, increased property value. There are several studies that have been done, most significantly a number of years ago by Robert Chipley, who have indicated that heritage conservation districts in particular contribute greatly to heritage property value. And social factors. So identity, sense of place, placemaking, these are important for a community, and heritage buildings create a unique sense of identity within a municipality. It also allows the opportunity to protect and celebrate communities and their cultural heritage, and not only dominant communities, but also minority communities as well. And we have several examples of that in the city of Kingston. And finally, it provides an opportunity for education. And finally, environmental factors. And when I talk about environmental factors, I'm speaking of the recycling of buildings and materials, the promotion of sustainable development, which I'll get into in a little bit, particularly adaptive reuse, and the existing buildings, the retention of existing buildings allows for capture of embodied carbon and reduction of landfill waste. The fewer buildings that are demolished, the fewer materials go into the landfill. I did a project a number of years ago, And it involved working on a large infrastructure project. And I was surprised to find, doing salvage for this project, that 50% of landfill waste is construction waste. And I was shocked by that. So any opportunity to reduce that landfill waste is, I think, a positive for from an environmental perspective. So the heritage planning team considers all these factors, as well as numerous others, when communicating with Kingstonians. Processing heritage applications, supporting work in planning and buildings, and creating or implementing heritage policies. So the heritage planning team currently consists of 4 positions. There's a manager, senior heritage planner, intermediate planner, and heritage coordinator. And currently, these positions are filled by myself as manager and Ryan Leary as senior heritage planner, Nikki Kensett as intermediate heritage planner, and Jennifer Hay as heritage coordinator. We're located within heritage services in the city hierarchy. And we're there along with museums and heritage programming. Our primary function as heritage planners is to process heritage permits under the Ontario Heritage Act and ensure change to heritage properties adheres to provincial and municipal policies. But we also have a secondary function, and this includes numerous things. And it could be everything from contributing to planning studies that the planning department is doing, to reviewing building and planning permits, managing the Heritage Resource Center, which maybe many of you or some of you have visited, and as well as reviewing and updating municipal heritage policies. Our team is currently located at City Hall. We've been located in various places over the years, but we're currently in City Hall. And I want to stress here that this is the heritage planning team. This is the team that deals primarily with change to the physical landscape when it comes to the heritage designated properties. But there are so many people at the city that contribute to the work that we do. And this includes the heritage programming and museums team, facilities. We work very closely with facilities, parks and forestry, planning, building, real estate, engineering. The list goes on. We really have an integrated system here, and we often communicate when we're working on heritage properties. So some recent projects that we've worked on. I mentioned earlier when speaking of environmental factors about adaptive reuse. So for those, many of you might be familiar with adaptive reuse, but for those that aren't, adaptive reuse encourages the continued use of a property through alteration rather than demolition. In a heritage context, adaptive reuse is preferred as it can retain, conserve, and showcase heritage attributes of designated properties. So I've included 2 recent examples. There are more, but I've included 2 here. The first is 47 Wellington Street. It's located in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. This is the one on the left, the image on the left. This project, I think, was broadly supported by the community, and I believe it won Frontenac Heritage Foundation Award. And it allowed new use of an important resource within the Old Sydenham HCD. Several members of the Heritage Properties Committee were able to tour the building after it was complete, and several members of the Heritage Planning team also toured it. And it was very impressive, and I think everyone really enjoyed seeing such an important resource within the Old Sydenham HCD actually brought back and reused. The next project is the Agnes Etherington. So on the right, this is at Queen's University. So this project is a little bit more complex and a little bit more contested. While opinion wasn't unified on it, a balance was struck between the development and heritage conservation. As you'll note, the heritage building, the existing building, still sits on near the street and sits in front of the new addition. There was a former addition there that was removed, and this new addition is in the process of construction. So as I said, potentially more contentious, but the balance was still to focus on the conservation of the heritage resource while ensuring that that development did occur. All right. So beyond Beyond adaptive reuse, in terms of the projects that we've worked on, we've also focused quite heavily in the past number of years on designating new properties. This is for various reasons. One in particular that I will talk in detail about later on. But due to the changing provincial legislation, municipalities, excuse me, have found themselves responding to a loss of a popular tool in heritage conservation. I won't get into too much detail, but we had an opportunity to have demolition control on properties that we felt had the potential to have heritage value. The provincial legislation was changed, and that tool was rendered ineffective in the same way that it was before. And the result of this is that municipalities across the province had to come up with a plan to protect heritage properties in the face of losing this demolition control. So Kingston's approach, there were several approaches that municipalities took across the province. Some decided to designate heritage conservation districts at multiple properties at a time. The city of Kingston chose to focus on pursuing single property designations. So we would identify each property and identify it, designate it individually rather than try and designate a large area. And this was done almost the work for this was done in our department almost exclusively by our senior heritage planner Ryan Leary, who worked on it almost all of his time during certain stretches. And his role in the project focused on researching and evaluating properties that would fall off the list, and then creating designation bylaws and reports to Heritage Committee and Council. And I oversimplified that. His job was much more complicated and much more laborious, but that was the essential goal there, and he did an excellent job. The results of the work is that we in the city of Kingston designated 137 properties over about a year and a half or 2 year period, and this is the most Part 4 designations in the province. So all municipalities across the province were all in the same boat, trying to come up with the solutions, and many doing the same thing. And the city of Kingston was able to designate the most properties within that period. And we're very proud of that. We only also had one appeal. So that appeal is still outstanding. So beyond the projects, adaptive reuse projects and designation project, the heritage planning team has also contributed to policy updates. And there have been several of them over the past few years. So the North Kingstown Secondary Plan, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of this or engaged in that, but this is a special planning area that focused on Montreal Street and the surrounding area. And the plan includes heritage policies that focus on conservation of heritage character. And the heritage planning team was instrumental. We were, from the outset, we were kind of embedded in the planning team and helped to form and refine the heritage planning policies that existed there, which included several updates and policies, including an expansion of the St. Lawrence Ward Heritage Character Area. We also updated our windows policy. The update to this really consisted of refined definitions and clarifying expectations of the window policy, but we hope it made it clearer and easier to manage with, and it focused on windows as heritage attributes. We're currently, I don't know if everyone's aware, but the city of Kingston's currently in the process of updating their official plan. And we worked quite closely with the planning department in this endeavor. So the heritage policies that are captured in the update were reviewed by the heritage team, and actually the entire section was reviewed and updated by the heritage team as well as the planning team. So we worked very closely. In addition to that, the heritage planning team has worked to address any comments from individuals or public groups. And the goal with the official plan, and I think probably with the official plan throughout, but also with the heritage policies, is to create harmony with provincial expectations around heritage policy. And in that, I think we've been successful whilst still ensuring that heritage properties and heritage landscapes are protected. And finally, in the updates for policy projects, I just wanted to mention the Heritage Management Plan project. This was the project where we engaged with consultation with communities at several events. Some of you may have been involved in our open houses or done some of our surveys or met us on the street when we were out front on the waterfront for Canada Day or along Princess Street. Um, so this is a multi-phase project, and we have completed part one of the project for phase one, and that focused on public consultation. The next phase of this project will focus on a review of best practice around the province, as well as drafting a plan for managing heritage resources within the city. All right. I'll now move on to our challenges. So, um, in any job, you always face challenges. In this job, the challenges, I think the most significant challenges of since in the time that I've been here, and really since 2019, I think for municipal heritage planning, has been policy change. And policy change, particularly at the provincial level. There are three primary acts that have changed quite substantially that we've had to manage change for to greater or lesser degrees. And these are them: the Ontario Heritage Act, the Planning Act, and the Environmental Assessment Act. I try not to get too much into the weeds and policy stuff, as I know it's kind of boring. But I will kind of gloss over and give you at least a high level description of some of the things that we struggle with. So first and foremost is a challenge to change to the Ontario Heritage Act. This has had really the most profound, the changes in to the Ontario Heritage Act have had the most profound impacts to our work. Um, the changes primarily cover process and process at various levels, but they have really changed the way in which we process heritage applications, the way in which we designate properties, and the tools that we can use in order to protect heritage within the municipality. Um, so, but despite that, there have also been some changes that I guess could fall outside of process and more towards going to what heritage is. And that's a change in the tool that we use to determine what is a heritage property. So this is a tool called Regulation 906, and there are 9 criteria that we use to determine whether or not a property can be considered for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. Previously, you only needed 1 criteria in order to designate a property, and now you need 2. It doesn't sound like a significant change, but in practice, it does make a difference because there are very few properties in the province, I can think of none, that meet all 9 criteria. More typically, properties meet 2 or 3, maybe 4. So that was a significant change. And the other aspect that I should highlight, which is the picture here, is Bill 23. And this is the bill that enacted the change that restricted our use of listing or demolition control. But beyond Heritage Act policies and changes typically between 2019 and 2025, there have also been changes to the Planning Act. And these are some of these changes impact heritage planning. I'll give you an example. The ability to comment on design buildings, on the design of new buildings, if they're right beside a heritage designated property. Before there was a lot of ability for the heritage planning team to comment on how the design should look for these new buildings, and now we're unable to do that. They've limited the opportunity for us to do that. So that's another change. And then changes to the Environmental Assessment Act. This is something that is not as pertinent to heritage planning in a municipal context. But across the province, there are significant changes to the way that, for example, large infrastructure projects are done. So when the Ministry of Transportation is redoing Highway 401, the way that they do archaeology and heritage, it has changed over the past number of years. But I think the largest change has been to archaeology. Um, so those are some of the broader policy changes. But now I'm going to talk about broader challenges. So those were very kind of very focused on policy changes, but some of the broader challenges that we've had, you might recognize, those of you particularly who follow the Heritage Properties Committee will recognize some of these challenges and will have dealt with some of these challenges. I think paramount among them is the question of insurance for heritage properties. Um, so for those who aren't aware, insurance companies have in some cases substantially increased premiums for heritage properties, and in other cases have refused outright to insure them. Um, and the team has attempted to address this issue through a variety of ways, through education, discussions with insurance companies, and working with council to provide incentives for heritage property owners. It is one of those challenges that has been around for decades, and there is an ebb and flow in terms of the response. I think one of the ways that we can really connect this to the next item that I have on the list says here, climate, is that in a market such as this where there are questions around catastrophic loss due to fire, flooding, and oftentimes due to climate change, there are increased issues with insurance and people trying to limit liability. But it is an ongoing challenge that we're dealing with, and we're making some traction, which is great. The team has been doing a lot and working very hard to address this. Um, Climate, as I mentioned, as climate changes, new challenges emerge. We've seen this through, across the board on a number of different disciplines, a number of different areas, but heritage is no different. Examples include accelerated material degradation or catastrophic events, flood and fire. Again, these will often impact heritage buildings, but they'll also impact abilities to get insurance, as I mentioned. And another more specific example that I thought I would include is the potential conflict between attempts to eliminate heat egress and from heritage buildings and the necessity for ventilation in these buildings. And I know this sounds a bit wonky, and it is, but it is this tension that I find quite often where there is a hope for engineers to create building performance to such a degree that they're locked down. But for those of us who understand materials in heritage buildings, the need to breathe is important for a variety of reasons. So this is a constant tension and challenge that we face. The next is development pressure. Again, this is one that is perennial. Development pressure, wherever people need new houses, this will always be an issue. And this kind of change occurs in every city. But right now in the city of Kingston, we're absolutely in a period of heightened change to our physical environment. Perhaps the most significant to this discussion is the increased pressure on the downtown, as I'm sure a lot of you have noted. And unfortunately, this change doesn't have to, but often does pit conservation of the built environment against proposals for housing and infrastructure. And really, it's heritage planners that sit at the nexus of this issue. And it's our job to balance heritage conservation with development and change. And I think like that is, if you take anything away from what we're here to do, it's one of the things that we struggle with and contemplate on a daily basis. It's how do we manage heritage conservation in the face of change. All right. And the last is community perspectives on heritage. So community perspectives on heritage are always varied and range from support and often ardent support, as many of you in this room are probably supporters of heritage, but the perspectives range through indifference to objection to heritage conservation as well. And that is also something that we have to manage. And I think one of the major issues, particularly when discussing insurance and development pressure, these recent challenges, they've intensified and made much more public the discussion over how we manage our heritage resources. So that's always, again, go back to balance. That's another consideration that we have and have to balance. So hopefully we're not too depressed, and I'm going to move on to some successes that we've had, and we've had quite a few. We've had a lot. So I'll start off with new designations. Um, I think probably the most significant over the past 2 years has been the Kingston Penitentiary. It's now designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It's also a National Historic Place and it's protected federally currently. But the designation under Part 4 means that if and when the penitentiary ever leaves the hands of the federal government, it will be protected by the city through the Ontario Heritage Act. Um, as many of you probably will feel, it's one of the most significant properties in the city. It dominates and defines the Portsmouth area, and it's an important tourist destination to the city. Beyond that, as a historian, I'm going to say this, it provides insight into the history of order and disorder and incarceration in Canada. And it's a very important property. I know our senior heritage planner, Ryan Leary, worked very hard and was very diligent in his work on this property. And I just, thank him profusely for the amount of time and effort he spent on this. Another designation that I think we're particularly proud of is the comprehensive update to the designation of the Rockwood Asylum. So this is an interesting and unique property. It's a largely intact institutional landscape, which is now occupied by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It's also a good example. So that's the property. The process of designation was actually a good example of the coordination between the city of Kingston and the province, our Infrastructure Ontario. It's currently owned by the province, as I mentioned. And similar to the penitentiary, we can designate the property, but we can't enforce any designation bylaw on it until it leaves the hands of the province. But luckily, we were able to work very closely with Infrastructure Ontario, and we were on the same page. And I really view it as a success story in working with multiple levels of government in order to protect a property. Then finally, just the significant Part 4 designations along Lower Princess. As part of that response to Bill 23 and the loss of the demolition control in the listing of properties, we were able to designate, as I mentioned, 137 properties, but many of those were along Lower Princess Street. Some examples of these include the Coffee & Co. building, the former Vandervoort's hardware store, and the Trailhead building. So all those were listed before and now have designations. Other successes include heritage planning projects. So as I mentioned earlier, we updated the windows policy in order to strengthen the windows policy. We also updated the heritage impact assessment terms of reference. And I won't get into too much detail about this heritage impact assessment terms of reference, but essentially what it is a document that provides our expectations, the city's expectations when we're assessing consultants' reports about change on designated properties. We have also doubled the Heritage Property Grant program budget. So 2026 will see an increase to the amount of money we'll be awarding through grants, and it's increased from 100,000 to 200,000 per year, so it's doubled. As part of this change, we've also kind of refashioned how the grants are given or the amounts that are given. So we'll now have one large matching grant of up to 50,000 and 15 smaller matching grants up to 10,000. There's also, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to go see, but there's been substantial restoration of the Frontenac County Courthouse, which is very impressive. The Heritage Planning team and I got to see the capitals up close and go up on some scaffolding, which was absolutely terrifying. But the project took several years to complete, and the final work is wrapping up this year. Several elements were restored, including the columns and the Kirkpatrick Fountain. And again, another plug for it. If you have an opportunity to go down and see it, maybe in the spring, it's really worthwhile. And finally, we've had over 300 approvals for heritage works in the last 3 years. So the heritage planning team has worked very hard to ensure that applications for alteration to designated properties were processed promptly and thoughtfully. The team works with property owners to clarify questions regarding proposed changes, ensure adherence to policies and guidance, assesses impacts to heritage attributes, and communicates where alterations deviate from policy, provides conservation recommendations for council's consideration. We do all these things in the process of processing a permit. And it's complicated and often requires a lot of consideration, and consideration that's behind the scenes. Um, we also make attempts to encourage consultation with the community beyond what's required through the Heritage Properties Committee. Some of you may know that we have a Heritage Roundtable, and every time a heritage permit comes in, we recommend, and the Heritage Roundtable is made up of citizens who are heritage minded, who comment on these applications. And every permit that comes in, we recommend that the applicant go in. We can't compel them to, but we recommend they go in and talk to the roundtable prior so that they can get some feedback prior to submitting their formal application. And I guess I just want to say, as a member of the team, I'm really proud of the heritage planners who work so diligently and spend their time and energy to ensure that we're making the best decisions we can with the information that we have. All right, lessons learned. I mean, I've only chosen a few. I'll continue to learn, but here are just a couple that I've learned over the past number of years. First, engagement with community, colleagues, and other stakeholders is central. Um, I always take opportunities for discussion, or try to always take opportunities for discussion. And I absolutely recognize the value of community in the process of heritage conservation. And when I say community, sometimes this is a catch-all word, but it's everything from coming to speak to you today to having a conversation with an individual at City Hall, to talking to the Frontenac Heritage Foundation or the Historical Society whenever a request is made, to talking to colleagues. We're lucky in Ontario that there is a network of heritage professionals in municipalities across the province that communicate with one another to discuss questions, concerns, and challenges and opportunities that we all have. And it's really that helps all of us do better work. So that's one of my lessons. Also, recognizing our role in heritage conservation is essential. And what I mean by this is that everybody in this room, everybody at City Hall who is engaged in heritage conservation, we all play a role, and recognizing the role of the heritage planner for me has been really important. We work within a policy framework and an attempt to balance development and heritage conservation goals. And it's really important for me to constantly tell myself, this is my role in the process. And as a part of that, I have to recognize what I can control and what I can't control in the heritage planning process. And finally, and this is something that the team also wanted me to bring up, is that balance and compromise are essential in this job. We always strive to try and have a balanced approach. And we try and ensure that our decisions are, as a mentor of mine once told me, they always have to be rational, transparent, and repeatable. So rational, can we justify why we're doing what we're doing? Transparent, does it make sense to people who view the decisions that we're making? And repeatable, if a rational person were to be engaged in the same process, would they make similar decisions? So those are my lessons. All right, goals. Goals for 2026. So first, our draft goals for heritage planning. We're currently in the process of trying to determine what's next in heritage planning, and which type of larger projects we'll work on. Some of our goals are tied to the heritage management plan work, establishing other long-term projects that we're working on, such as potential HEDs, heritage conservation districts, further refinement to the incentive program and how we might do that, and ongoing community engagement. And the intent is to demonstrate and reinforce a connection between heritage stewardship and climate action, as well as economic benefit. This is one of the goals. And this is, I think, best exhibited in the official plan updates, where we've worked hard to demonstrate wherever possible that heritage conservation and economic benefit and environmental stewardship are tied. They're connected. Beyond that, we're making progress on our Queen's Heritage Easement Agreement, which is great. This has been on the books for a while, and we're making some great headway, which I'm very happy about. We complete the designation project this year. So that Bill 23 that I had up before and the loss of the listing function of the Ontario Heritage Act, listing this goes into effect in its entirety at the end of this year, so January 1st, 2027. So we will be wrapping up the designation project this year. And then completion of heritage policies for official plan. This is driven by the planning department, but we will continue to support them and ensure that all the heritage policies are updated. And immediate next steps, we're working on the Heritage Property Loan Program. This is part of the incentive project and report. An update to the Heritage Property Tax Refund Program, also part of that incentive report. As I mentioned, the Queen's Heritage Easement Agreement, working on several heritage planning studies. And there is a substantial restoration to Kingston City Hall that will be upcoming very soon. So that is my presentation. I am absolutely happy to take any questions. And here's my contact information in case you should want to reach out. And thank you very much for having me.